this part, we are going to learn ecology. Ecology is the study of the relationships between living organisms and their physical environment, which means we will consider both the living things and the non-living things. Before that, let us start with the level of organization. The first one, we have organism, which means an individual. For example, a human. When we have a group of organisms of the same species live together, for example, a group of humans, we call it a population. We have populations of different species living in one same area. For example, we have populations of humans live with populations of dogs, cats, and then the plant populations. We are all different species, but we live together in one area and we call this a community. You can see from organism to community, we only consider the biotic components, which means the living components. Now, when we take into consideration the interaction between the biotic, the living components, and the abiotic, which is the non-living components, this is what we call an ecosystem, which is the main idea of ecology. Ecosystem is the interaction between the biotic and the abiotic components. Like I mentioned just now, biotic, they are the living components. For example, we have this, and we will learn them later. What about the abiotic factors, the non-living things? We have air, which is the atmosphere, water, the hydrosphere, temperature, sunlight, soil, and minerals, they are the lithosphere. So we will have these living things interact with the non-living things in the environment. Together, this is what we call an ecosystem. So when we have group of ecosystems that share similar climate or communities, we call them a biome. Example, we have tropical rainforest, and in every part of the world, the tropical rainforest, they share the same communities. We have temperate as well as tundra climate. All this we say biome. And a bigger picture, the biosphere, which means all ecosystems inhabited by life. Now, let's look at the concept of ecosystem. Like I mentioned earlier on, it is the interaction between the living things and the non-living things. And we say that an ecosystem is an open system. What does it mean by an open system? It will have both energy and nutrients exchange between the living system and its environment. If it is a closed system, then it will not have the nutrient exchange with the environment, which can't happen in ecosystem because the ecosystem cannot sustain itself. We need to exchange nutrients with our surrounding. That's why we have to be an open system. Each ecosystem will get the energy input from the sun, and then we will use this energy, and when this energy is used, it will be lost to the environment as heat when we carry out processes like respiration and excretion. So you can see that energy comes into the community being used and lost to the surrounding as heat. This shows a one-way direction flow. So we say energy flows through an ecosystem in a one-way direction. Since the ecosystem is an open system, we will have the nutrient exchange with the surrounding. And that's why in this part you can see we will get the nutrient input from the environment. An example of nutrients, we have nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus. Why do we need this? Because we need them to make the organic matter, which are the proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and so on. So you can see how this is recycled. The inorganic matter is taken by the living organisms to make the organic matter. And then when these organisms die, they will be decomposed and it will return the inorganic matter to the environment. So we say nutrients, they are recycled, they can be recycled, but energy cannot. Energy cannot be recycled. It's just one-way flow, simply because we do not create energy. The efficiency of the energy flow as well as the nutrient cycle can help to stabilize the ecosystem. Now we are going to look at the biotic components that I mentioned just now. The producer, from its name produce, it means it can synthesize its own food from the inorganic raw materials. How? Through the process photosynthesis, by using sunlight and convert the light energy to chemical energy in the food. Examples of organisms that can carry out photosynthesis must be the green plants, green algae, the phytoplankton. They are the autotroph, the producer. Whereas consumer, from the name you can tell, they consume. It means they need to eat. That's why it refers to the organisms that cannot synthesize its own food. Example, we have herbivore, which only feeds on plants or algae, vegetarian. We have carnivore, which only feeds on meat. They eat other animals. And omnivore is both. It eats both animals and plants. What about decomposer and detritivore? Both decomposer and detritivore, they will use the dead organic matter, but they use it in a different way. Decomposer, the feeding mode is saprophytic, which means they will secrete the digestive enzymes externally, break down the dead organic matter, and then only absorb the digested molecules. Example of decomposer, we have bacterial and fungi. This is very, very important. How is this different from detritivore? On the other hand, detritivore, they are holozoic, which means they need to eat, ingest the fragments of the dead organisms, which is the detritus, and then digest internally. This is the difference. Decomposer digests externally, detritivore digests internally. Examples of detritivore, we have earthworm, crab, snail, and shrimp.